Good afternoon. Welcome to House Appropriations. It is Tuesday, March 18th at about 2 o'clock. We are assembled to take up page 321, an act relating to miscellaneous cannabis events. We have our counsel with us today. Michelle, if you could take the seat and maybe you can give us a quick overview of the cannabis legislation.
Good afternoon. So for the record, I'm Michelle Childs, Office of Legislative Counsel, and committee looks a little different. So if I haven't worked with you before, I'm part of the...
Would you like us to introduce ourselves?
Wouldn't hurt.
I'm happy to start, Mr. Vice Chair. Dave Iacoboni from Morrisville, representing Lemoyle, Washington. Greetings.
John Kosenska from Burke. I represent the Essex Caledonia District. Nice to meet you.
Jump down there. So I'm Mike Nigro, I represent Bennington and Powell.
Tom Stevens, Waterbury, representing the Washington Chittenden District.
Jim Harrison, Chittenden, Mendon, Killington, and Pittsfield. And Robin Shy, our chair, who is tied up in another meeting from Middlebury.
Tiff Lilly from Burlington.
Trevor Swirl, Underhill and Jericho.
Wayne Rush, Berkshire, Franklin, Richford, and Heidi.
Dickinson, St. Albans Town.
I don't know if I should just skip over all the people I know. So, so thank you for that. I appreciate it. So as I mentioned, I'm a member of the judiciary team, and some of the issues that I cover is I cover all the regulated drugs and the drug laws, and have been doing that for since the 90s. So seeing a lot of changes over those laws, and typically I handle them on the criminal side, but as cannabis has evolved over the last 25 years or so, I'm sticking with it. So so now I'm working with GovOps on the regulatory side of it. And so just for a little background for those of you who might be kind of a little new to the issue on this, is that in 2020, the General Assembly adopted a really comprehensive act creating a tax and regulate system for commercial cannabis. Vermont's had a medical program for a number of years. And so they set up, as part of that, they set up a regulatory board as part of the executive branch. They're an independent agency, and took a little time, about a year and a half, to get kind of the agency stood up and things rolled out, the rules adopted. So now you have as I'm sure everybody knows, commercial cannabis system for folks who are 21 years of age or older to be able to purchase cannabis at a retail shop. And the state issues licenses for people to operate within that system. And so because it's new, and maybe we won't have these bills in 10 years from now, but because the industry is new, every year there's been what we just call a miscellaneous cannabis bill. That's kind of like all the little small tweaks that the agency comes to the General Assembly and says, well, we're learning as we build the plane, right? And so we're asking for these changes. Sometimes there's some bigger substantive policy issues, and oftentimes it's a lot of just technical things. And so this is the annual miscellaneous cannabis bill. And I don't know how much you want me to talk about the substance of it. I mean, I can get down to the bottom and just like give you a little heads up, is that the only thing in there that is really calling for an appropriation is a new position for an enforcement attorney. There is not an appropriation attached to this bill. So not sure what you're going to do.
I'm going to assume you can address that.
Yes.
Okay. And before I forget, Senator Boyden from House GovOps has joined us. I assume you might be the reporter of the bill. Okay. So if we have any questions in terms of the committee, we can direct them to Representative Boyden.
Okay.
So in terms of the bill, if you could give it very high level, I don't know that we need any real detail unless we have questions.
So a few of the things that it does is, so as I mentioned, there's a number of different types of licenses that the board issues. There's cultivator licenses, retailers, wholesalers, product manufacturers, testing laboratories. And one of the things that the bill does is it creates a new trim and harvest license. And these would be for folks who are working oftentimes on a seasonal basis and working with cultivators to kind of prepare the cannabis for the next stage in the market. And so there is that new license that's added. Just so you know, kind of the underlying foundation for these licenses is people can only obtain one of each type of license in Vermont. So if you could have one of each type of license, but you can't have multiple of each license. So you can't have somebody be like the Vermont McDonald's of cannabis retailers. So you could only have one retail license. And that would be the same for this, although those trim and harvest licensees would be able to go and visit other licensees. So they'd be able to service a variety of cultivators that are licensed under the current system. And there's a $500 licensing fee, annual licensing fee for those cultivators. The amendment also does a number of small tweaks around background checks. So one of the requirements under existing law is that folks who are going to be involved in the regulated cannabis business have to have full background checks. That's been difficult for not only Vermont, but for other states in obtaining those full background checks from the FBI. So there's some little language tweaks there in clarifying that if the CCB is not able to obtain those records through the feds, that they can get that from a third-party provider, and also that they can do rechecks for licenses. So folks who may have been had a license for a little while, they can, if they feel it's appropriate, they can go back and do another record check on someone, make sure nothing's kind of happened in the interim from the time when they did the first initial check. There's also a provision in there that would allow the CCB to issue a temporary license to someone who is seeking to be a new employee of a cannabis establishment. So sometimes because these checks can take a while, it kind of becomes a little bit of an issue for some of the licensees. And if they've lost a couple employees and they're trying to get new people onboarded, the CCB under the new language here could, while they're going through the process, could issue them a temporary license. But anybody who's going to be an employee of a cannabis establishment has to have the background check and has to have these in order to be working, so that the Cannabis Control Board knows who's working in the different licensed entities. Let's see, what else is in here? There's a provision in there that was requested from the tax department. Just kind of some technical language you probably should have caught earlier, but requiring that a business that collects cannabis taxes notifies the Department of Taxes before transferring the business to a new entity. There's also a new process in there for how the board would go about addressing issues if there is a problem with the business failing. So if you have a cannabis business and something happens to the principal, or it's falling into bankruptcy, or there's other issues there, you have a licensee that has a lot of cannabis on hand. And so what do you do about that? And so there's the ability in here for a new process for the CCB to issue a temporary permit for someone to essentially kind of take control of that cannabis business, to unwind the business, to be able to handle the cannabis. And that's a new process that's in here. And it could be someone who is currently licensed by the CCB, or it could be someone that they vet and determine that person is appropriate to be able to do that. There's a clarifying regulation on hemp and hemp-infused products. This was something we actually did last year in last year's miscellaneous cannabis bill, and we changed the definition, clarifying it in actually the agriculture title around hemp and hemp-infused products, and we just forgot to put it a Title VII definition, so it's the exact same definition there. I think I kind of hit the highlights without having to make you read all 20 pages. Happy to answer questions.
The question is, maybe it's out of bounds, I'm not sure, but.
We'll let you know.
You mentioned that, you deal with criminal issues, but still federally illegal.
Yes.
So what kind of liability do we have if suddenly the federal government decides that they're going to enforce the existing federal law?
When you say what kind of liability do we have as a state or as a state? So Vermont is we are not, it's different obviously than what we do with liquor, right? So we're not the ones in possession of it, we're regulating. We should have immunity in the sense that we're just regulating the product. This is an area that's, I think most states, I think maybe 28 states now have adult use cannabis, and many, many more have medical programs. The people who are participating in the market are not insulated from the Controlled Substances Act at the federal level. They do obviously assume some risk and liability in participating in the market. State can't do anything about that, but we're kind of in the same situation as a lot of other states out there where these have developed over a number of years, kind of with, and it's up to the feds about whether or not they would choose to enforce any provisions of the CSA.
Because we know that we had testimony earlier that they wanted to buy, for example, a mass spectrometer to do testing for pesticides and whatever cannabis, but they didn't want to have it tested at the ag lab because I would assume that there's a possibility that federal money could be involved if they did that. So that's why I asked about the liability, because someone's going to be testing.
Yes, I know that. So Michael O'Grady works on our ag stuff, and because of I'm trying to be kind. It's kind of convoluted, the distinction between hemp and cannabis, right? We're kind of talking about the same plant. We're talking about different THC levels. And I know that there's a lot at the federal level around agriculture and hemp products and how you do that. And I think that we're always trying to be careful, and I rely on Michael for that around the ag stuff to make sure that nothing is jeopardized there, because I know that that can be an issue for farmers.
Could be a little blurry, so it's a little blurry.
Well, in this case, we don't have any state-run pot shops.
Yeah.
So we don't have that liability. I think that's a really good question and a very good distinction to recognize the difference between that and we have state-run liquor stores, but that's allowed.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Michelle before we get to Ted from Joint Fiscal? Okay. Thank you, Michelle.
Hello, everyone. Ted Barnett, Joint Fiscal. I don't know if you want me to share the fiscal note up on the screen.
Does everybody have a copy of it? I think we're probably good. It's on
Posted as well, right?
and it's posted on our.
We like one side, one page.
Sure.
Yes, this one's pretty straightforward. Do you want to comment on the fee changes that are in the bill? Because those fee revenues go to the Cannabis Regulation Fund, which are to pay for the expenses of the Cannabis Control Board. And through the various changes, we don't see much of an impact at all on fee revenue. The Control Board estimates that fewer than 10 establishments would apply for the new Harvest and Trim license. And then there is a potential introduction of, I'm going to say, choppiness in revenue, again, of kind of small magnitude. Section 12 would allow establishments to apply for 2-year employee licenses for $100 in addition to the current annual $50 fee. So in fiscal year 26, if you have more establishments, the 2-year $100 license, you might see a slight bump in fiscal year 26 and then a slight decrease compared to current law in fiscal year 27. But again, not a large magnitude there. Of more interest to the committee is the position that Michelle mentioned. There is a creation of an enforcement attorney position. The Control Board estimates that position would cost $150,000 per year, and that cost is not accounted for in the bill. There's no appropriation.
So,
Go ahead.
yeah, where is the money supposed to come from? Or where is it being proposed to come from?
That is a great, it's not contemplated in the bill. It's outside of the 26 Gov Rec language in request from the Control Board. So I think a decision for y'all as to where it comes from.
Okay. Tom?
Why wouldn't it come out of any of the funds that exist that are derived from cannabis funds?
It could come from the Cannabis Regulation Fund. I think there you would have to consider some conforming changes with the mechanism in the GovRec, right, that holds apart a certain amount of FY25 excise tax revenues to pay for FY26 control board expenses. You'd have to make adjustments in that section to make it all square, but you could appropriate those funds from the regulation fund.
Are there funds in that fund? Are there enough funds in that fund to cover something like this?
Yes, it just would change the amounts starting in fiscal year 26. That is so right now there's the $8.4 million transfer from the regulation fund to the general fund in fiscal year 26. And so that might reduce that amount. But there is looking at there might be, depending on how cannabis excise tax revenues perform above or below expectations, right? That also plays into how large that transfer would be.
Well, let me ask the question this way. We have a cannabis control board budget, and we obviously right now taking the governor's recommend and put it into fiscal year 26. If we say, okay, on this position, do we have to change the governor's recommend because the expenses are going to be higher? And then two, potentially we have to decrease that transfer unless it doesn't sound like the new fee license is going to offset this. So, so we're going to have to reduce, which is essentially a general fund potential, or it goes to prevention and,
Well, some would consider that, right.
okay.
It's sort of general fund. It affects the general fund no matter which way we do it.
Right.
I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, and one other piece I would note is that the control board in House Government Operations did note that the enforcement attorney because the enforcement attorney might generate some fine or penalty revenue. JFO does not forecast that type of revenue.
Yeah, exactly.
But did want to flag that was part of the testimony in House Government Operations. But yes, it is a general fund consideration one way or another. It just depends.
I ask you,
Yeah, and then
the fees, if there are fines, if there are fines, where do they go?
That is I would have to look at the specific, generally fines and penalties go to the general fund. I would have to confirm whether that is the
I
case.
didn't know if it was.
They do not, they go to the regulation fund. Okay,
They go to campus.
regulation fund. They go to regulation fund.
yes.
Wayne, and then I have a question. Go ahead.
So has there been any enforcement so far? And if so, how's it being paid for?
So those would be great questions for the Cannabis Control Board who's sitting on the sidelines. I don't know if Pepper has additional context for that.
You want to come up to the table?
Sure.
Pepper?
Thank you for having me. James Pepper, Chair of the Cannabis Control Board. We have a single attorney right now who's in charge of not just being the general counsel for the board and kind of doing legal work at the front end prior to enforcement actions. But he is also now acting as our sole enforcement attorney as well. So yes, there are enforcement actions ongoing. I have some numbers. I was actually going to send them earlier today, knowing that this bill was coming here. But I think the frequency and complexity of our enforcement actions has been increasing exponentially, and I have the numbers that I can show that, which is to be expected. Our initial project was getting the rules in place, then getting people licensed, and now we've turned really into a compliance and enforcement agency. The number of complaints, we get around 30 complaints a month. We do inspections and investigations based upon those complaints, but it's just a number of kind of letters of warning, notices of violations, hearings, and appeals of those. It's just been growing.
So do you have a sense whether behavior is becoming worse, or is it just because everything's getting bigger?
the number of the size of the market has grown exponentially, and the amount of time people have had to have violations has also, increased. I mean, the first issuance of licenses was kind of late in 2022, and so we've only had really one full fiscal year, and then, but there are some real challenges to only having a single attorney deal with this, and it's just like the criminal justice system, there is a deterrent effect to us being able to prosecute these cases quickly and effectively. And if we don't do that, on the flip side, there's kind of a perception in the regulated industry that we're not, prosecuting violations or even investigating them. Then there's kind of a risk that they will breed more violations.
Representative?
So you have letters of warning here if someone's out of compliance for sentencing here, one way or the other. To what degree does this result in kind of fine at all? And you're not quite there with that.
There's graduated sanctions, and the letters of warning are sure. Yeah. Right. So the letter of warning would be for something that just really might be unintentional behavior, something noticed, to go in and see that someone didn't check the ID at the door, which is a regulation we have. Or they're not wearing their employee ID badges, or we see maybe like an illegal advertisement within the store. That might generate a letter of warning. The next level up is for really intentional violations. Those are the kind of notices of violation, and those come with a penalty associated with that. And then the person who has been assessed the penalty can appeal that to the board. That's determined by our compliance agency, is very similar to the processes that exist in other administrative agencies. They appeal to the board. We can determine whether there are kind of aggravating or mitigating circumstances that we could reduce or increase the penalty. Then we enter someone into what's called a corrective action plan. Usually it involves some kind of fine and then some sort of ongoing compliance. And then they're allowed to appeal that to an administrative law judge. And then if the administrative law judge, has their burden of proof and standards that they apply, and if they agree with the board, that person can then appeal that to the Supreme Court. And so as we increase these notices of violations, the work on our sole attorney increases exponentially. Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions, but I think it's more for either Michelle or Ted. You're welcome to sit there. We have more questions for you, Pepper. But so I looked and I saw that House Gov Ops voted it out 10-01, and then it went to House Ways and Means and it said 11-0. But did Ways and Means just have? Oh, but yeah, but I just have a question about Ways and Means. It looks like they have an amendment, and I don't know how that's working with what the bill is that we have. Did it get incorporated into the bill that at all, or is this? I'm not sure what to do with that amendment. I feel like it's a hanging participle, dangling participle. We have a hanging amendment.
They did adopt an amendment.
Yeah.
It is related to cannabis in the sense that the amendment is exempting
I can,
tobacco taxes. I'm sorry, I'm not the one who's
Okay,
attorney, but it's related because of tobacco and cannabis and
Right.
exemption.
So they added nicotine, and I get that. They added some nicotine and that related thing. But all I'm seeing from their website is so did that amendment get incorporated into H321?
It will be on the floor.
It would be on this is going to be a floor amendment from the committee?
From the committee, so that's going to be the report, because they voted on the bill and then they voted.
And then they voted this, so okay.
They didn't vote the bill as amended by their committee.
Right, that's what I'm trying to get to.
They did. They did.
Anybody here from Ways and Means? No. So.
I thought they did.
Go ahead, introduce yourself, Lucy.
Representative Lucy Boyden, Oscar with Operations and Military Affairs. I believe the Committee on Ways and Means, it says that they respectfully report that it considered the same, meaning, the same as house or operations, and recommends that the bill be amended.
Right, by adding a new section.
Yes, so they approved our version plus their own.
So we kind of need their section because what we're getting is your bill.
Right, without
Their
their,
amendment. Right?
I found their amendment on the Ways and Means website, but I don't have, that's where I found it.
Well, you did your due diligence.
Because I heard fees, so I thought,
Yeah.
well, Ways and Means saw it, so.
Yeah.
I wanted to see what their vote was, but I didn't realize they had an amendment. So.
Well, we weren't gonna vote on it.
We weren't gonna vote on it right now, we will. I don't know if we need to get Ways and Means to come,
Well, we need to understand exactly what their amendment.
right, and nobody here worked on that amendment.
Who has cannabis?
So
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I did give so Kirby Keaton does the Kansas tax.
Yeah.
service, And this was an amendment that came from Ways and Means.
Right.
Through Kirby to add to that, so you give Kirby a heads up that this bill's coming up, but we've got book kind of late, so I think he was
Okay.
somewhere else, but he does know, and I think probably if you want to have.
Okay.
In, on that.
Okay.
She tell you that.
Yeah, I think we should probably do that since it was amended and it's a little bit changed. But we have what we came out of GovOps, and that was 10-01 in GovOps, and whatever they voted on Ways and Means was 11-0. So we're not talking anything terribly controversial in those two committees from their standpoint. Ted, what else do you want to tell us?
And from JFO standpoint, the changes by Ways and Means have no fiscal impact. It's mostly technical definitional changes that the Department of Taxes requested.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So I think we'll need to hear, Aaron will figure this out, but we'll need to hear maybe from Kirby and I don't know who on, Mike, can you just find out from Ways and Means who's dealing with this, and then maybe we have to come together for 15 minutes. I don't think this will be long. Does anybody have any other questions for the people that are in the room with us today? The policy stuff was dealt with in GovOps, so
I just have a budgetary question. If we need to address these.
we aren't gonna vote on it until we have that figured out. Yes, many of the things that come in have just had per diems, and now this is actual money. So,
Potentially. We don't.
yeah, so Pepper and then Wayne.
Apologies. Yes, I generally don't testify on the budget issues, or I have an executive
Right.
director, but I did speak to her when this was referred here today, and she does believe that between the vacancy savings that we're expecting from our two chemist positions, because there was, significant delays in BGS finding us a place to locate our laboratory, as well as if this position were to be created, it would alleviate some burden that we are currently filling with a temporary position that's budgeted for in FY 26, that we could pay for this in FY 26 within our existing budget.
So one possibility could be that we could consider creating a position but not funding it. Not ideal, but it does mean that down the road there would be some, and then they have a year. So Mike Nigro is our liaison with cannabis, so feel free to talk to Pepper if you need to, and everybody else. We will not be voting on this today, but we will also want to hear from Ways and Means, so we'll figure that out. Wayne, any other questions that you
No,
have?
it's just my concern with paying for it with general fund money is, and if they
Yeah.
can pay it for out of that cannabis fund.
Right, well, when you can pay for it out of the cannabis fund, it reduces the amount of money from the cannabis fund that comes to the general
I
fund.
understand that.
So-
It's not in the budget.
It's not direct,
It's not direct,
Right.
as per my questions back to the
right,
council.
yeah, understood. Okay, I think we have what we need from the people that are here, so thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Lucy, I'm sorry you had to crutch your way down here. Glad to see you on the mend and moving around. We appreciate it. So let me just check my text committee. Oh, okay. I would like to this afternoon spend a little bit of time on all of the work that everybody did, sort of looking at all the priorities, and we got a shorter list of priorities now, so maybe we'll look at that one as the most, the easiest one to look at. And let's just have a conversation about what we're noticing and what we see. I'll be talking to, leadership about it and just sort of taking everything in and we'll see where, where we're gonna go from there. So it's not to make decisions, it's to just have a conversation and check in with everybody on how we do. The other thing I want to tell you is that we expect to finish the budget adjustment negotiations with the governor's office this afternoon. It will come to it will be a committee bill from this committee. So we're starting a new budget adjustment bill, right? I mean, not this, there will be some changes. It won't be a lot. We're going to need to vote it out of here tomorrow morning. Well, it's not going to be a lot of stuff that you're not familiar with. And we'll have, Emily will have like a little spreadsheet thing about what it is. So that's what we're going to do tomorrow morning. So just wanted to let you know that that's going on. So we don't have enough to do. So then that will go along its merry way. And then, so I want to try to get a handle on how we're feeling, really try to nail down some of the numbers. And then we're really going to have to look at language. I keep bringing that up, but we'll have a sense more with the numbers as well if there's other language that we have to do. And we've talked about a couple of those items, right? And then we're going to have a straw poll sometime before midnight on Friday. I hope it's not too close to midnight. Remember that one year we were in the lunch lounge till
I remember.
11 o'clock. We hope not to be in that.
About 5
And Chris
iterations.
was one of the people who saved us, and Charlie kept coming in and out with new bills.
I know,
Anyway,
I
it was
know.
quite a night, but we did get pizza, and I forgot to ask if she was here.
Don't forget last night.
Okay, you asked. So what we're gonna do is by Friday, we're gonna basically have some spreadsheets that tell us where we're gonna spend, where we're gonna cut, what the one-time is, what the base changes are. And so we're not gonna have a whole budget that's 317 pages long. We're gonna have pieces. So we'll have the one-time changes, the base changes, whatever else I'm forgetting changes on that. And then we're gonna have pieces of language that would be different from what we had in the governor. So it's kind of a piecemeal thing. But then we'll say, given all of these pieces, how are you feeling about the budget? And that's kind of what the straw poll is going to be. And then our JFO folks are going to work like crazy. Oh, this is their weekend that they never see their family because they're working on this. And they'll call us or text us or whatever if they have questions about your piece. And then typically what we've done is we come in at 1 o'clock on Monday. They hand us a budget. We go live and say, here's the budget. Answer a couple questions, we go off live, we go away and we read the bill for the next 2.5 hours. All our support staff will be around, so if we have questions, if you find something that's wrong, all of that, we would do that. And then we would come back together once we've done all those things and we'd have our real vote. So that's the rollout. Is that making sense to people? And we don't have a lot of time. So it's full court press. Tish, did I, do you have anything else that I missed, or Jim, or Trevor, any of us have been here? Lynn, no, that sort of sounded familiar?
It sounds familiar.
Okay.
But I think I just have a question about, we haven't closed, I take responsibility, there are a number of sections that are not closed.
That's right.
And I'm just wondering when we imagine, would you like us to email you, Maria?
We'll just, you have your list.
Okay.
I think what we'll do is be ready to go through them tomorrow, starting tomorrow, see what else we can close. What the other loose ends are, and we know there'll be some that will be Friday before we close. We just know
And
that's
some of it's really dependent on what do we do with the extra requests, because that will change.
That's
the
right.
Base budgets and the one.
right. So that's what I want to try to have enough of something to present to you tomorrow about that after we've had this conversation. Tom.
So tomorrow will be a long day. I mean,
Wednesday,
it's
Thursday,
tomorrow,
Friday.
yes, tomorrow the time in the conversation we have where we say, well, somebody recommended this cut or this additive to, is this where we're talking about beyond the piece of paper? Which I don't hear the chorus of angels when I read it, about this is all solved. But is this when we are going to sit here and literally, just go, okay, we have a vote on each of these things? I mean, so.
So we don't
there's-
usually vote on each of these things. Line by line.
The package has to sort of get the consensus of the.
Right,
In
for
general.
instance, we've seen in the document we got yesterday, there were suggestions for funding for any particular item that ranged from 0 to full funding.
Right,
How is
So-
that presented and dealt with?
right. So I will come with a proposal tomorrow that tries to incorporate all of our conversation today and what we hear, what we've heard, and talking to leadership, and we've had the committee letters, so we've gotten, and the public hearing, so we've gotten a lot of input. And now it's time to just start to make some real decisions. And we made the decision about the JTUC transfer. That was a huge decision. Pat Walker owes us big time. So he was
But
very
that's not
grateful.
JTOP, because JTOP doesn't exist, right?
That it won't exist as of FY
We
'26.
can call it like Warren or something, and we just effective.
Oh, it was already- Give it a
You want to
name.
pick a new name, you pick a new name.
So
So-
that'd be helpful to have some kind of tally as you're describing here, so you kind of know, at least in a proposal form.
You'll have something like that tomorrow.
Yeah,
And
I feel like.
whatever we do, we have a finite amount of money. There's a lot of really good things. We all know that, and we aren't going to be able, lots of people are going to be disappointed and have different levels of disappointment. And that's what our job is, right?
Yep.
But to do the best we can, and I think we all know that we want to do the best we can for the most people we can in Vermont. I think we all have a lot of very common approaches and, goals to it. The ways there may be a little bit different, but that's what we're here for. So if you want to take Maria, does everybody have a copy of the 5 and 5 spreadsheet?
No.
Everybody get it.
So here is, I think that's 11 copies.
Okay. I'll give Mike Murphy his when he comes back in, so there's just enough for the 4. One last for Mike. Okay.
Like the real big
Well, the font was big. The font was big. So I think, Maria, what you did was we all said, here's our first 5, here's our second 5. A couple of us said, here's some other stuff, because sometimes we have a little bit of money left over at the end, and we'd like to always think about funding those. I didn't give you a lot of direction other than that yesterday. So let's take a minute to look at it. Would it be helpful if we had 10 or 15 minutes to do this and then broke and then came back and talked about it at 3 o'clock? Why don't we do that?